Hello friends, the article which we are analyzing today is published on Hindu, July 22. The title of the article is The Main Planks in a Counter-China Policy. The article is written by M.K. Narayanan. He was a former National Security Advisor and a former Governor of West Bengal. So this article is written in the context of military standoff with China which happened at LAC, and now this negotiation is going on to resolve the problem, and we see that China is creating aggressive behavior all around its neighborhood. So what we see here, that author is arguing that to deal with aggressive China, not only India has to focus on military option but other option also. So what are the other options that this article discuss about? So that is what we are going to analyze here. That means India has a capacity not only use military option, but India can use its soft power also to deal with China. So first we'll analyze the Chinese action. So we see that there was a standoff and a military confrontation between Indian and Chinese army and at Galwan Valley, and there around 20 Indian soldiers died. The casualty from Chinese side was not disclosed. It may be much higher than Indian side, and for that reason there is a talk or truce going on related to disengagement, but this details of that talk negotiation is not much available in public domain, and some sketchy information is available in that author conclude that disengagement process is proving to be a difficult one because China is adamant and it is not going to the previous position from where this fight started. So we'll analyze the Chinese action and the current negotiations. So what author says, that disengagement process is proving to be a difficult one, and there is no demonstrable progress in troop disengagement and de-escalation is reported. Both the army are in a standby mode, and we see that India has mobilized its troop. Similarly, China also did in their part. And if you see the where the dispute lies, so India's position is that to have a complete disengagement of troop along LAC, but China is emphasizing on confidence building measure. So there is a fine print here. What India is asking, that to maintain the status quo and to have the same kind of position which was earlier there, and along with that a complete disengagement of troop along LAC. But what China is seeking, that having encroached upon Indian territory, what it is emphasizing is confidence building measure. But China was the country who broke the confidence, and China is emphasizing that to build up a confidence building measure with along in border area. So we see that author is saying that Chinese intention is to manage ground situation to its advantage and bring about a realignment of LAC. So here we see that Chinese goal is clear. What they want to have a this escalated ground situation somehow they want to manage, and at the same time they want to realign the LAC as per their perception of LAC. So this adventure of China of encroaching Indian territory at LAC, this was not a one-off incident, but a great deal of planning went into it before incursion across the LAC at multiple points. So this incursion happened at multiple points, and there was a great planning before going into it. So these are the things China did. So what are the consequences of Chinese action? So if we see that related to this border agreement, there was a lot of talk going on between India and China starting from 1993 to up to 2013, and all those talks which were painstakingly conducted and agreed upon was washed away by this Chinese treacherous action. So Chinese action have irreparably damaged the painstakingly devised border agreement of 1993, 1996, 2005 and 2013. And by this action, there is a message behind it, and there is a change of policy also we see by this Chinese action. So what are those changes? Changes are that China, by this doing this aggressive and hostile action against India, China has shown and has said its image of as a status quo power and behaving like a expansionist power with an intention of dominating geostrategic space in its neighborhood and across Asia, with a goal of displacing US as a global numero uno. And that is the Chinese strategy is now becoming clear. And in that context, if we see that earlier there was a talk of Asian century where India and China partner together, with that proposal, that is not going to happen because China does not want India to rise along with it. What China is trying to do is to displace US as a global superpower and make itself as a global superpower, and it does not believe in Asian solidarity, or it does not want India to rise as equal to China. So here we see that sometimes back when we see that China was not taking any aggressive posture, it was basically meant to consolidate its power, and now China believe that it has now reached to a level wherein it can exercise its hegemony. And at the same time we see with the Trump administration, US is withdrawing itself. So China thinks that time is appropriate for it to do aggressive behavior, make effort for hegemonic situation along with its neighborhood and in particularly in Asia, and for that reason India become its first target. So but having said that, author also believe that China will not go into war with India over territory. China will not escalate the dispute with India to a level of war. Why? Because India is also not a pushover and it is unsure of its victory. That in case of all-out war, it does not believe that it will win over India. And by this war, it will jeopardize its future relationship with India that China does not want, because there are other commercial and other aspect in that relationship with India is there which it does not want to put at risk. What basically it is wanting to make India humble, make India look poor, make India look weak in the eye of Asia and world, particularly in its neighborhood. So what basically it is trying to give a message to India and to world at large that India pose no challenge to China and somehow weaken the confidence of Indian people and India so that they should not challenge Chinese hegemony in its neighborhood or in world. So that is the basically we see the immediate goal of China is. So again we see that Chinese intention here is to not go into the war with India but somehow weaken the position or humiliate India in the eye of world and its neighborhood so that nobody will believe that India is a match to China, and this way China will be able to exercise its influence across Asia and its neighborhood, and that also is a Chinese along with the along in the same line of Chinese policy of challenging US for global numero uno rule. So that is what author is making sense of Chinese action. So now coming to the second part, in this situation where Chinese are trying, so in this situation where Chinese aggression is there, what are the options India has? So we see that author is suggesting that we have multiple options, not only military option but other options are also available to India to deal with China. But military option as is always very important. So we have to keep our military option open and keep strengthening our military forces. And in that direction, this mountain strike corps, which was earlier envisaged but shelved, should be revived because this is going to be the major challenge to China if China try to act aggressively against India. So mountain strike corps, which is basically meant for fighting Chinese threat, need to be revived. Along with that, it is also very important to know when and how to use military power. That means what author is saying, having military power itself is not sufficient. We should know how to use it and when to use it. So the timing and the way military power is exercised is also going to be very important decision. And in this direction, the policymaker should not get carried away by domestic sensitivity. So our foreign policy, military policy should not be dictated by domestic sensitivity because of the kind of media propaganda and other things are happening which will raise the temper or emotion. So policymaker should not be become hostage to domestic sensitivity because it should be cold and calculated decision based on our capability and the timing and how it has to be used, particularly military option. So this is very important point. And another important point which India can use to counter China is diplomacy. For that reason, India should use all its resources, business person, diplomacy and other tools to create an international opinion in its support and brand China as an expansionist power and make international opinion maker to understand India's position. So this is also going to be very effective because due to this pandemic and Chinese aggression all across, China's image overall has taken a beating. So it is a right time for India to mount a diplomatic offensive to corner China. And for that reason, the cultivation of foreign leaders are important, because if we can get the understanding or sympathy or attention of foreign leaders, that will help us in forming or shaping the opinion of foreign countries. So it is very important that Indian diplomacy engages foreign leaders and create a international opinion in its favor. In that region, in that context, this non-alignment movement, which India was championed of it, need to be revitalized, because it gives India a big platform from where we can mount a diplomatic offensive against China. And another thing what India can do is to engage on aid diplomacy, because India is providing aid to many African countries and smaller Asian countries. Those the influence and other goodwill drawn because of that can be used to in India's favor, compared to what we see that China is doing. China is basically buying influences. China is spending money, and in return of that, it is getting some kind of influence. And Chinese intention is basically the any country where China is giving data or giving aid. Basically, China want to have a political and economic subjugation of that country. Same thing what we are seeing in Pakistan and many other African country also. China is using the same technique. It will put another country into a debt trap, and then it dictates the terms. So now many country in the world over getting getting the good idea of Chinese this aid diplomacy, and they don't want to fall into the debt trap. So India can do a lot of work here, because Indian aids are untied. India does not put any strings to its aid. So this is a good way to create a goodwill for India. And the second thing is making use of social media and technology. What we see that India being a democratic country, thriving media, and similarly the governance model in China is closed. It's like a dictatorship, and their social media is not free. So here India has a comparative advantage, and through social media and technology, India can expose Chinese design, particularly in its neighborhood and its global ambition of being a hegemonic power. And author suggests that India should focus on its neighborhood. Recently, we have seen the strange behavior of Nepal. So this was a surprise to India, and this thing happened because India did not pay sufficient attention to its neighborhood. So it is very important that if we want to counter China, our neighborhood should support us. So again, India should focus on neighborhood. And what author is suggesting that India should make alliance with other countries, like-minded countries. In that respect, particularly this card is very important, which is a basically grouping of US, Japan, India and Australia. And other Chinese neighboring countries like Vietnam, they are very much against of Chinese expansionist policy. They can be a very useful partner of India to contain China. So this is one thing, but the most important thing is India's inherent strength. Our Indian strength lies in unity in diversity, which we have to protect. Our polity should not be fragmented. Our internal coherence and our internal unity should not be in any way should be damaged. and India should use its spiritual, religious, and cultural aspect to create a kind of soft power which will deal with Chinese aggression. And in that respect, the role of Dalai Lama is very important, because Dalai Lama is considered as a world renowned spiritual teacher, and he has got a lot of influence. So we can use Dalai Lama, particularly Himalayan Buddhism, to create a kind of soft power which will help us, and which will help diplomacy also, to bring international opinion in India's favor. So here we see that Chinese aggression is basically meant to give a message to India and to somehow humiliate India in the eye of world, so that China, so here the basically Chinese goal is to humiliate India, and to counter that India should use not only military option but many other options which we have talked about. So it is a good article. It has given a different angle of how we can deal with China. The second article, the title of the second article is Toward Robust Data Regulation, and it is again published on July 2nd, 22, and the author is Astha Kapoor. So government has set up a committee to regulate non-personal data with the objective of unlocking data in for public interest. And that committee on July 12 released a report on governance framework. So committee has released a report, and that article talk about that report. That report is related to non-personal data and how this data should be used or should be unlocked for public interest. So we need to know what is non-personal data and how it can be unlocked, and what is the public interest lies here. So in the report there are three components in this whole scheme. So first component is data principal. The second component is data custodian, and third component is data trustee. And all three are interconnected when we are talking about non-personal data. So if we want to regulate this non-personal data, committee has suggested three part. Committee has divided it, the whole thing, into three part. First is data principal, the second is data custodian, and third is data trustee. So what is data principal? Data principal is entity, an individual, a company, or a community which generate data. So it is a kind of source for data. That's why it is called a principal. So for individual and for company, a lot of clarity is there. What kind of individual will generate data, what kind of data will be generated by their by companies, and what are the safety needed for data security, their commercial proprietary application, all those things. So a lot of clarity is there related to the right of individual and companies with respect to data. But community, it is still ambiguous, because these are the entity which generate the data. So there is an ambiguity in the idea of communities as a data principal. So what does it mean to be a community as a data principal? So in the report it is not much clear, and Similarly, in the report, their right and function of community is not much clear. Because if you see that there may be many communities and they may be unequal and vaguely defined and possibly working in conflict, possibly conflicting with each other. That means one community wanting in that way means the interest of one community lies in that direction, another community the interest lies in another direction. So how we will make a community particularly for data protection and how their interest will be defined, that is one issue where the report is not much clear. A report on governance framework is not much clear. And the another entity as per report is data custodian. So that entity will basically do the collection, storage, processing and use of data. So this entity will get the data from data principal and collect it, store it, process it and make use of that data. So what will be the terms of engagement between these two? There is not much clarity on the report. The third thing is report talks about data trustee. Basically this data trustee as entity will do the protection of data principal. It will work on behalf of data principal to protect their interest. And this trust will be managed by public authority. But this factor of trust from here to here, how this trust will be extended and fructify, this is not much clear in the report. And it is also not clear how trustee will be empowered to act on behalf of community. So these are the points which author is trying to say is not properly covered in the report. What report says that data trustee will be governed by rule and some protocol will be there for containing and sharing data. But how this empowerment of trustee will work and will work on behalf of community is not very much clear, and how this function of trust will be extended also is not very much clear. Report says that trust will be managed by a public authority which will represent community and act on behalf of data principal. So this is one aspect which we see here. Coming back to data custodian, so we see that data custodian will be an entity which will collect, store, process and use data. But again, in report details are not very much clear. Details are little fuzzy because this data custodian will be which one? Either it will be government or private entity, that is not clear. And how they will define the best public interest for which this non-personal data will be used, that also is not clear. Means who will define and how they will come to decide that this is a best public interest. Here also report does not say much about it. And there is another aspect here, it related to use. That means they are going to monetize the non-personal data of data principal. So this is again an area of concern. Under what terms and condition this data custodian will make use or monetize the data of data principals. So these are the area which is not very much clear as per author in the report which this committee has prepared. This report is for governance framework and these are the gray area as per author lies there in the report. So that has to be looked into. With that, the second analysis is concluded. I hope this analysis will help you to improve your understanding. Thank you.